You're going to pass this around during the sermon. I have it marked on page, I don't know what page this is, but you can look at other pictures in the book if you like. But these are photographs from the Hubble Space Telescope, and this one in particular. I wanted to recreate that with the children, but it was a little hard with the flashlight and paper. A lot of people have been posting on Facebook about where they were the day that Kennedy was shot, or the day they got the word that he actually died. How many of you remember where you were? Were you alive yet? All right. Anybody want to say where you were? What was going on?
Kindergarten.
No.
And the teachers were crying, and we had to walk up home because we shut the school down. You know, and we went to school, I had to stay with the neighbor. And the TV, the TV got what I remember the most.
Yeah.
That non-stop.
Yeah. All the way through the funeral.
It was in a junior high school or middle school football game between the upper 7th graders and the lower 7th graders. It was a big annual event at the school. And when the game was over, we found out the president had been shot and killed. And we lost a close game, but even at that age, it didn't seem to matter. So,
Yeah. Where were you living?
Los Angeles.
In LA, so it was an early in the day event.
Yeah, it was like in the morning.
Yeah.
So we found out probably an hour after the
Okay.
I was living in San Francisco, and I was, it's really one of my earliest memories. I think I was like 4, and I remember my mom crying at the TV, and that's just one of my first memories of seeing her, seeing my mom cry, really sobbing, crying.
Our family was living in Trowbridge, England, and I noticed as people were posting that everybody was in school, but where I was, it was night. And that's why I wondered about that football game. My dad was working at a church in Trowbridge. My mother did our laundry in the backyard in a big tub that had a wringer on it that she had to crank. Very different. It was night. The telly, as we called it over there, was on. The television is in most of these stories too. And a damp wind was leaking into the house through unseen cracks. My mom was crying. My dad was angry, and I thought they were fighting. But it was the news that President Kennedy had been assassinated. I was 8. My siblings were 6, 5, and 3. When I was 13, it was Martin Luther King Jr. And 2 months later, it was Robert Kennedy, the first presidential candidate that I walked precincts for with my dad. I never knew an America where public figures were not targets. And if we're aware of history, none of us have ever lived in a country, let alone a world, where the life of a president was not in peril. Since our founding, 4 of our presidents have been assassinated: Lincoln, Garfield, McKinley, and Kennedy. We tend to forget about Garfield and McKinley. 15 presidents have experienced assassination attempts and foiled plots on their lives, some of them multiple times. Andrew Jackson, Abraham Lincoln before he was shot, Theodore Roosevelt, Herbert Hoover, Franklin D. Roosevelt, Harry Truman, John Kennedy, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama. I don't know if you've noticed a trend here. Since Kennedy's murder, there have been attempts or plots against every president except Johnson. And I don't think he was around long enough to have it happen. To date, Bill Clinton and Barack Obama are tied with 4 each for keeping score. We've all grown up in the shadow of the regularity of assassination. We've also grown up in the shadow of the atomic bomb and nuclear power and global warfare, which now includes just the word terrorism. I mean, that's global warfare. And planetary extinction. And the psychological gravity of these are no different from the shadows that played on the face of the infant John the Baptist, born under Roman occupation, one highway away from being beaten and robbed, one failed harvest away from starvation, one judgment away from a stoning, one invasion away from exile, as his father sang. By the tender mercy of our God, the dawn from on high will break upon us, to give light to those who sit in darkness, and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace. The truth is, humans have never walked upon the earth without peril. It is dangerous to be alive, let alone standing on a pedestal lit up by spotlights against the dark backdrop of high expectations. It is dangerous to live in occupied territory, and most territories are now and have been for centuries occupied by non-native species, foreign forces, immigrants, refugees, conquerors, tyrants, terrorists, corporations, gun lobbyists, bigots, asylum seekers, missionaries, fanatics, criminals, control freaks, codependents. Ellen and I are definitely in that category. And we are occupiers, aren't we? Addicts and ignorant, dogmatic family members, not to mention unstable strangers. It is dangerous to walk across the street or to sit at a bus stop when some teen with a partial frontal lobe decides to speed up onto a crowded sidewalk. It is dangerous to be born into a family that is careless with its children. It is dangerous to seek help at germ-ridden hospitals, or to live on an island during a typhoon, or be black and poor in Chicago, or be a girl in Afghanistan. It is dangerous to speak out or to stay silent when human rights are violated. It's dangerous to be on the internet, or hand a credit card to a sales associate, or attend class at Sandy Hook Elementary School, or be in Terminal 3 at LAX on some random day of the week. It is dangerous to be a politician, trust a politician, stand next to a politician, love a politician. It is dangerous to be alive. It always has been. It always will be. World without end, amen. And yet we dare to take up the song of Zechariah. By the tender mercy of our God, the dawn from on high will break upon us, to give light to those who sit in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace. There are people who've expressed life's peril far better than I ever will. Vladimir Nabokov puts it this way in the first lines of his autobiography, Speak Memory. The cradle rocks above an abyss. The cradle rocks above an abyss. And common sense tells us that our existence is but a brief crack of light between two eternities of darkness. Although the two are identical twins, man, as a rule, views the prenatal abyss with more calm than the one he is heading for at some 4,500 heartbeats an hour. And I'd be remiss if I didn't use at least one quotation from Shakespeare. This from Macbeth. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, and that's me, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. And then there's my son Peter, who is 7, and seems to have always been aware of his own mortality. And earlier this week he announced, "I'm thinking about me, Mama, and I don't want to die. I want to live my child years. I like my child years." I told him I'd like him to live even more than that, but we went on. So what is it besides willful blindness to the nagging reality of death that allows us to get out of bed in the morning? What is it that inspires us to make ethical choices, live meaningful lives, love other ephemeral beings anyway? Perhaps it is the belief borne out by the physical world that shadows are cast by objects only when there is a light behind them. The valley of the shadow of death exists only if there also exists a commensurate light behind the shadowy hills. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where will my help come? My help comes from God, who made heaven and earth. By the tender mercy of that same God, the dawn from on high will break upon us to give light to those who sit in darkness in the shadow of death, and to guide our feet into the way of peace. The shadow is proof of the light. It also proves the existence of the object cast in the shadow, for those of us who have a tendency to doubt our own substance. The shadow is proof of our presence here and the presence of light beyond us. And then there are those who have seen the light. An older woman in the first church I served chose to die at home. She had reached a point where she could no longer speak, but signaled to her daughter that she wanted something to write with. And moments before she took her last breath, she scribbled on the back of an envelope, "See light, see light." When I was 8, before we moved to England, I was turning off a light in the bathroom. The light had a chain that hung down over the sink. Remember those? So I climbed up on the counter to reach it. I steadied myself on the faucet, grabbed the chain, and completed the electrical circuit with my body. My mother heard me scream, a noise I don't remember making. What I do remember is a sense of absolute calm and peace, and sensing a light coming from behind me. And the light over the sink was in front of me, and it was already out. Mission accomplished. I was worried that the light would go out. This was another light, a brighter light coming from another direction. And as I turned to look at it, my mother grabbed me around the waist and yanked me to the floor, sobbing and certain that I was already dead. In case you're still wondering, I survived. But I also have a clear memory of the light, and it was a powerful thing. Whenever I need a refresher for that memory, when the shadows seem to loom large, I look at photos sent back from the Hubble Space Telescope. The one I'm drawn to repeatedly is that photograph of clouds trillions of miles long, giving birth to new suns, for us stars, giving birth to light. This is the light in the darkness that reassures us and counters the black holes of uniquely human despair. We are meant to cast strong shadows in this life, and we are called to point in the direction of that which makes possible all shadows. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. So by the tender mercy of our God, the dawn from on high will break upon us, to give light to those who sit in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace.